Settings. Accessing archive. Authorizing. Access granted. Accessing file.
Topics ranging from, DNA to astrophysics to the meta-programming of the human mind and human consciousness, and kind of how all these things form one big circle, and there really is no gap to bridge once you kind of make that concept full circle within, your own thought processes and whatnot.
Right. Amazing. So, first of all, congrats on the new album, Solstice.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is incredible. I jammed it. Thank you for that early listen. Incredible sounds, man. Like, it sounds like you're coming from the rainforest, but it's like, shamanized. It's like super organic feeling, but then it's got that like nasty bass.
Right. Yeah, I'm so glad you enjoy it, man. I mean, that's kind of the premise of the album is, to kind of bridge the gap between modern culture and ancient culture, particularly the shamanic cultures that, in my opinion, have never severed their connection to nature kind of the way that we have. And I think music serves as a great medium to bridge the gaps interculturally.
Absolutely. So yeah, man, I mean, with your level of production, it sounds like you've been doing this for a long time. It is so clean. It is so just masterful in its audio engineering and the way that things jump out at you and the place that they sit and in the mix. How long have you been doing the music thing?
Man, I appreciate that. I've been producing music since I was about 13. I've gone through ups and downs and different techniques and styles and whatnot. And up until about 3.5 years ago, the thing that I produced the most of was kind of like a New Orleans bassy funk music.
Hmm.
And so I was producing this funk music, and I love it. I still love funk, but at the beginning and ends of long nights, I would find myself listening to shamanic throat singing music, rainforesty jams like that. And
Hmm.
ultimately, it just made the most sense for me to where like I could be producing music from like my soul's true core to kind of develop this kind of shamanic bass music fusion and see where I could take it. And this album is kind of the first manifestation of that, volume one.
Hmm. Hmm. Damn, you did a great job. You did a great job.
I appreciate that.
So with interest in, shamanism or, shamanic visions and these types of things, I mean, it feels very clear that you have dabbled with plant medicines or psychedelics. Are you down to kind of, talk about, what maybe you've learned from the psychedelics, what they mean to you when you started using them and that type of thing?
Yeah, sure, man. I mean, obviously, I've been experimenting with plant medicines, not only plant medicines either, but, any type of modality to explore consciousness, the nature of consciousness, the human experience that I can I mean, I started with psilocybin mushrooms when I was a teenager, but that has thus evolved into many different manifestations of plant medicine since then. And, many different intentions per se of, what I'm trying to learn or what I'm trying to master about myself or my relationship with life or my relationship with other
Mm-hmm.
people, and just kind of how to like live inside of brain and heart coherency, and but
100%.
do you have any particular questions about any of
Yeah.
them?
So, what was your first most powerful experience? One where they worked, because, for me, the first few times I did psychedelics, I didn't really break through. I didn't really have
Mhm.
a spiritual experience. I was just kind of feeling kind of funny, kind of, ooh, I feel a little like I'm drunk, like on a gram of shrooms. You're not really
Mhm.
hitting this like consciousness expansion on such a massive level. So for you, like, what was that first kind of breakthrough experience where you really like started to see, the other side, so to speak?
Well, when I was young, about 13, 14, I mean, it all started with mushrooms for me, and I live over here in Louisiana by the Honey Island Swamp. And what we used to do is go back over to Picayune. I don't know if y'all know where that is in Mississippi. And I mean, they were just free for the taking. And we kind of got spoiled in that sense. Every time it rained,
Amazing.
we could just go fill up bags, right? And so, when I was that
Wow.
young, it was never practice for me at the time to weigh doses. I used to just throw them all in a big pot and boil them down, and kind of
Wow.
whatever happened, right? And so that's kind of when obviously I began to realize, like, hey, this here, this is not a drug. This is something very much more than that, and it's connecting me in a million indescribable ways to something deeper than my previously held belief systems and infrastructure of thought processes of what the human experience was, right? And then so after
Absolutely.
having, like a bunch of kind of really groundbreaking experiences, not only did it kind of shape who I grew into be as I approached adulthood, but
Mm-hmm.
it obviously made me curious about what else was out there. And then, then
Mm-hmm.
that thing led me to DMT, which ultimately led me to 5-MeO DMT, which is the absolute end of the road. I mean, that one right there is as far as it goes, the toad.
That is the one I haven't done yet, and I'm meaning to. So once I do it, I'll definitely have a podcast and talk about it. I've tried, I've tried almost all the psychedelics, but some of them just evade me. It's like they just don't present themselves. I don't find them. If I do find them, it's just not the right time. I'm just not in the right place. You know what I mean? So,
Sure.
with all psychedelics, I think there is, this level of when you're ready, it will come. It will find you. So, I think I'm getting close. My spider sense is tingling towards the 5-MeO,
Really?
but I've definitely tried normal, NN
Mhm.
DMT. Big fan of DMT. It's very powerful medicine. And yeah, I've got a great relationship with the plant medicines. They have definitely pointed the way for me to follow my creative path because I feel like I've probably said this a bunch. I'm probably repeating myself, um, but like there's a level of creativity that exists within everybody, and it is an outlet
Right.
for like putting your emotions, putting your aspirations, and a lot of people maybe don't uh, a lot of people maybe haven't found the exact craft for their creative expression to flourish.
Right.
So like when it came to me in psychedelics, I was able to have such a deep appreciation for music on another level that I was literally like, music is one of the most important things that
Mhm.
exists. And that is why I have thrown myself into creating music, creating a record label, doing live shows,
Right.
everything that Time Wheel does is I just saw music as like this thing beyond what it's like the most valuable currency there ever is. It's not
Right.
that you buy things with it, but it's just like the level of enjoyment and fulfillment that it can offer both as a creator but also as a listener is just it's just like unmatched,
Right.
A world without music doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. I think one of the fundamental reasons for that is that, in waking life, the harmonic proportions that kind of construct the universe aren't necessarily apparent every direction that we look. And in certain forms of visual art, but especially in music, it seems that it's most apparent in music. It is an
Mhm.
undeniable way of expressing and sharing the fundamental harmonic proportions that create all of the universe and all of reality, if that makes sense. It's a way
Mhm.
to experience those proportions with your sensory perceptual tools in a way that it's a little bit more difficult, even through vision. It's a little more difficult, but unless you're a mathematician, art and visual art and music are kind of the only way to experience that truth, in your face.
100%. It's funny. I wonder because you said earlier that you like talking about these types of things. And for me on psychedelics, I get this very novel sense that music is just like moving the air, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. It's like vibrations that move the air. It's almost as if I can see it.
Right.
You've kind of, it's like you can almost see the echo, the visual echo of what's happening, and you're like, it's so mystifying because in these psychedelic states, everything is astonishing, everything is
Right.
amazing because you're able to see deeper levels of information about everything you're perceiving, things that are, I think, always there. But we just aren't tuned to the frequency to be able to perceive
Right.
them. That to me really is part of the reason why they're so amazing, because you can do things like see music as a musician. That's very helpful to increase your appreciation for music, but it also allows you to get a deeper sense of what reality is and how sacred it is, and
Right.
how beautiful and rare and deep that it can be. Where a lot of people, their mindset is so just like on the modern day-to-day society, social media, consumer culture, just like nothing's good enough, the internet's not going fast enough, like, my food hasn't arrived yet from the Uber Eats, or all
Right.
this stuff. It's like people get wrapped up in that as the
Mhm.
world, but the actual real world here is like this infinitely deep, infinitely wondrous, incredible gift of an experience that we're just so privileged to get to be here. And that, I think, is what erases
Mhm.
depression and erases anxiety. And you hear about psychedelics being able to do that for people, is because they can see that just like the simplest things, just being with each other, just listening to music, just feeling a gemstone or whatever it might be, these deep experiences you can have are what really makes happiness.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. And to circle back what you were talking about, as far as you feeling like these things are always here, but we are not tuned to the frequency to be able to perceive them, that's absolutely correct. And not only are our sensory organs, particularly vision, hearing, etc., tuned to specific bandwidths of the spectrum for your ears, obviously about 10 to 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and for your eyes, from red to
Mhm.
violet, etc. Apart from that, that's like a hardwired tuning. But apart from that, what else prevents us from experiencing all of reality at once is a brain information processing system that is called top-down signal modulation. And what happens is
Mhm.
your neocortex, the part of your brain responsible for abstract thinking, it's basically what makes us human, just because of the sheer amount of it that we have. Um, is basically top down modulating in a feedback loop the bottom up sensory input, which begins in the thalamus, which is kind of the operator of your brain. It's where the sensory input originally goes to be dispersed elsewhere in the brain. And what happens is that
Oh, wow.
that bottom in input is being modulated by the top, so it's called a top down signal modulation. So in real time, your neocortex is actually filtering out much of reality before it's dispersed by the thalamus elsewhere in the brain. I hope that makes sense. So basically, in real
It
time,
does.
your brain is inhibiting the input signal. So most
Right.
of the brain's circuits are actually inhibitory, meaning outright subtractive from the final
Yep.
perception that we end up observing. So human consciousness and
Right.
baseline neurochemistry is actually more constrained than unconstrained, particularly just because of that. And
Yep.
what's interesting is the thalamus and the thalamocortical area, which is what's controlling this for the most part, is basically akin to the eye of Horus. If you cut a brain, I'm sure you've seen that before. If you cut cross section of the
Mhm.
brain in half, it's the thalamus that's like the outside of the eye, the pineal and pituitary inside right there. And so basically, my perspective of that is that eye of Horus symbolism is basically, explaining that this physiology, this part of your physiology is what is, you know, presiding over the
Mm.
control of how much of reality you can experience at any time. You know what I'm saying? And I
100%.
mean,
100%.
experience and perception, they're so illusory that it's wild. Like even things as simple as, if you look at an apple and you see that it's red, it's actually not red. It's every color except red. So let's say because red is
Wow.
the only wavelength of light that bounces off of the apple. So within the apple, it's not red. It's absorbing every other frequency of light, and
Mhm.
therefore, it can be said that it is all colors except red. So if you can picture something like
Hilarious.
ayahuasca visionary states where everything kind of has that multicolor shimmering look, that would kind of be how the
Yep.
world looked if our sensory perception was not wired the way it is with, vision, for example. That apple would be just shimmering every
Yeah.
color except red, perhaps. It's crazy, man.
Incredible. Incredible. That makes so much sense because you get, in a psychedelic state, in an expanded consciousness state, you get this sense that, this is more real.
Right.
And it probably is. Like the things you're seeing do probably change color, so to speak. You know how maybe an apple will be like changing color because, and now like this like level of this part of your brain that is normally decreasing the information perceived is now allowing slightly more information, and you can just see all the like the meta
Right.
details. And in a sense, it seems like that is, science, but like science has been, wary of psychedelic. Well, not a lot of I mean, there are certain scientists that are super into it and that are super gun ho, and I'm lucky to have worked with a couple of them as well. But the kind of general typical materialistic science doesn't really seem to value altered
Right.
states. And I wonder, I wonder why that is. I guess they just think that it's like, your brain playing tricks on itself. But until you have that experience yourself, it's kind of really impossible to put this brand on it. Like, this is what it
Right.
is, like so many of these scientists don't do it, and they will claim to know what's going on. And that to me is just a little funny,
Well, I
I
think
don't
it's
know. What do you
because
think about
our,
that?
especially Western science, is based on objectivity. And so if you can't see what I'm seeing, then, we're not both technically observing it. It might not be reproducible in a scientific experimental setting, et cetera. And, science's backbone, as we know it here, is studying objective phenomena, whereas the phenomena we're discussing are
Right.
subjective, and they may not be, but they're really hard to find with instruments, right? So, I mean, we can't even, as it
Right.
is right now, define consciousness. We don't know if it's just a system of logic. We don't know if it is the ability to make decisions to influence your future based on your past. No one can really even define what
Right.
consciousness is. And honestly, I think that's part of the magic of the human experience. We're limited here, and that our limitations create the program possible to have the human experience as we know it, right? So it's almost like part of the game.
Mhm. It's so funny. Like you kind of hear of those metaphors or those idioms that say like it's right in front of you. It's
Mm,
just beneath your nose. Like the whole time, all of this metaphysical inspiration, creative beauty, glory is like right there in front of you. And you're just like, your brain is just tuned to this ego frequency, or it's like, what am I going to eat tonight? Chick-fil-A, but it's like at the same time, you could just be perceiving the
yeah,
infinite
right.
oneness, the mystical, yeah,
Mm,
yoga, just the interconnectedness of all of things and our place in nature and how we would want to treat each other and nature if
right.
only we knew,
Yep.
you know and it's right
Yeah,
in
and
front of us.
it's as if these things
Crazy.
are little Easter eggs just placed into our reality and embedded here for us to find at the right
Hmm.
time and just start, being given that reminder. Because, certain these experiences, man, the way that they present themselves as a totally self-evident truth, as you were saying, feels realer than real. I mean, a self-evident truth is just something we really don't get to experience too often, and the power in which these concepts are just like zapped into our heads is just like
Hmm.
unrivaled through most, of our day-to-day interactions. So, when you are reminded, in other words, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that you are, eternal, that you are part of a big woodworking system that is the universe, that, love, how powerful of a force love is. It really
Hmm.
is a wake up call. And it really, really does. I mean, I've seen it for years and years help so many people to totally flip flop their life around, and begin living a much
Hmm.
better life, bound in more and more happiness.
Hmm. Absolutely. I do believe it's not for everyone. Certain people that just had a certain upbringing, that just have a certain way of thinking, setting, all the stuff, they're just not going to have a good time on psychedelics.
No.
And I think that's fine, but I think that for people that aren't in that group, this is like a must-have experience for just like understanding what
Right.
being alive is, so that you'll actually maybe live to the deepest level that you can. Because I mean, it really depends. Some people, that there are I've read this book called The Master Game, and it talks about these different essentially games that humans play. One of them is a householder game, so it doesn't make it wrong to simply raise a family and pass your genes on. It's totally not wrong. It's one game you can actually play. There are several other games. The Fame game is one. But the Master Game is the game of realizing the infinity in every day and bringing forth creativity, essentially leaving something behind you, some type of product that lives on
Right.
far beyond you. If you're able to do that, you're playing the master game. And also just to be in awakening, and to be in yoga, and to be in a sense of, namaste with the
Right.
humans that you interact with. That again is the master game. So a lot of people on a spiritual path are, whether or not they know it,
Right.
going towards that like highest kind of thing that you can embody as a human experience, which I think is great. And listen, you can't play it perfect. No one is perfect. You're not just going to play the game and the master game and make and
Right.
never get angry
That's
again.
what I was gonna
You know
say.
what I
Yeah,
mean?
a lot of people fixate on that, missing the point that's not in fact the point. Balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the
Right.
point is just stay in touch with it. It's like you don't have, like you're gonna get angry, you're gonna get sad. Like you're not gonna just stay in divine
Right.
bliss for all of time, even if you do a yoga pose for 40 days straight, which I've done this type of stuff, trying to really keep my energy high. But then you realize, hey, there's a fluctuation and it's okay. Like human experience is beautiful. Emotions are beautiful. There's a certain beauty to be found in being sad.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, no
if you look
doubt.
at it from the right angle, and hopefully teaching you stuff too. Emotions can teach you things if you're able to integrate them and not push
Right,
them
right.
down.
Yeah, no doubt.
Dude, I'm looking at your album cover right now. Tell me about it. Who is it? Who is it by? Like, what does it represent? It is insane. It is
Man,
beautiful.
he is so amazing. That is LO Projects.
Okay.
Check him out on Facebook. It's ELOH Projects.
Shout out Elo.
He is nuts. I don't know how he does this, but that piece took like blocked out work for I think 3 months until we finally finished. It's actually huge. It's 36 by 36.
Wow.
And it's like, I don't know if you can zoom on it, but it's really detailed.
Yeah, I can see.
He's all about that detail work, and he's just really, really good at what he does.
Incredible. This is on. Would you say this is on some 5-MeO, or is this more ayahuasca?
No, man. Honestly, 5-MeO is almost entirely void of visuals.
It's just white.
Yeah, when you have what they call the whiteout experience. But there are visual effects, but it's a little different. We can get into that in a second. But yeah, that's more of like an ayahuasca. Actually, what's going on there is as far as the visuals, yeah, it's like really, really kind of like an ayahuasca vision-y kind of piece. But there's a lot like going on in there, a little subtle stuff and DNA and all that stuff with the snake, the ayahuasca serpent, the Mayans called it Quetzalcoatl, all that stuff. And there's just a lot of little elements mixed into there, big and small, that just kind of communicated what I was trying to communicate for the record. So, but yeah, I have like a fascination with DNA like no other, based on a whole series of experiences I had and continue to have regarding it.
Oh, you heard it was discovered on LSD, right?
Yeah, Francis Crick.
I don't know the story,
Yeah.
but I do know, and if you know it, please tell me. But I heard DNA was discovered on LSD.
Yeah, it's not that it was discovered, the double helical structure of it was discovered. So what happened was they knew it existed, but they didn't know what it looked like or how its atomic structure was in 3D. So long story short, Francis Crick is the guy. Different story. Someone else actually did this work. It was a woman, but he got all of the majority of the credit for it. He did a lot
Oh,
of it,
wow.
but she kind of got dumped. But he was on an LSD trip when he started seeing the double helix shapes and recognizing it, or forming it in his mind that was DNA. And they did go on to discover that was in fact the structure of DNA, and he won a Nobel Prize for that.
So he intuited it.
Yeah, I mean, man, every time I take high doses of LSD, I'm like swimming in it, to be honest. I can't even see. I'm like stuck in double helical DNA structures,
Wow. So is that closed eye or even open eye?
Both.
Okay.
I'm
I haven't
talking
taken massive doses. Tell me, like, how would one take a dose, like responsibly to be able to witness what you're saying, just seeing DNA
I
all around
mean,
me.
I can't like sit and recommend that people take doses like that. Kind of just know your limits and stuff. But what I'm talking about is generally on 350 plus mics. I don't ever take more than like 450. I don't really see a point in doing so. I'd rather experience the tryptamines than such a high dose of LSD.
Sure,
Quite
sure.
frankly, it lasts so long. Like by 6 hours in, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go to sleep and like see you
And it's
again.
just starting.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that chemicals, like by looking at this album art, people might just see this as a beautiful artistic expression.
Sure.
No, you can actually go there.
Right.
You can actually be in that scene. To a lot of people that don't kind of understand the certain level of beauty to it, I can see them saying, "Oh, it looks scary,"
Right.
or like, "It looks like a red man. I'm scared," or
Right.
whatever. But it's like when you see that dude is like a transcendental prince right here. You know what I mean? With like cosmic snake vibe, Kundalini, DNA, Quetzalcoatl, you name
Right.
it. This is just like the archetypal Godhead experience. Like literally you feel like if imagine, I recommend looking at this artwork if you're listening to the podcast. Where can people find it real quick so I could find the artwork? We are going to put it on Time Wheel, so you'll see the artwork on Time Wheel.
Oh,
But where
great.
else
I
is
mean,
it
it'll
going to
be
be?
all over it's going to be attached to the tune. So, I mean, it'll be on all platforms, September 18th. So there's
Awesome.
also some other spots premiering it. Rolling Stone India is actually doing a premiere of the single One
Hey,
Truth. And then Sheave Light
boom.
YouTube channel. I have Taz Visuals doing
Oh,
visual.
Taz is amazing.
He's nuts too. Those guys are just otherworldly artists. I'm so glad that there's
Oh,
artists like that exist who put so much work into transcribing the visionary state. Like that's super important in my opinion, because what we look at right now, 2000 years back, whatever, and view as like religious artwork, 1,000, 2,000 from now, maybe this is going to be the religious artwork, because this is transcriptions of the ineffable. And I would argue, without trying to offend anyone, that this is kind of like more truly applicable to real world experiences. I mean,
I agree. I've been thinking this whole time that that this is the spiritual artwork of the age.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're going to look back to these album arts, to these, Alex Gray type paintings, all of this stuff as how we look at, like a handprint on a cave saying, "Oh, look, they're figuring it out a little bit," like that's going to be them looking back on us. And what would be really interesting is if they didn't have access to psychedelics anymore, they're going to be like, what did they know?
Yeah.
Like say for some reason they lose the ability to produce psilocybin in the like 2000 years from now, or all of the different chemicals somehow get erased by, who knows, some AI, who knows, I don't know. But I'm just saying, like, if they lost the ability to have psychedelic experiences, like they would not have no idea what we were on, where we were coming from. They would think that they were so de-evolved, so to speak, that like we were these titans of mastery. And it's so funny how we look at the ancient Egyptians that way. It always is that way. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's interesting.
I was just about to say that as well, circling back to the Egyptians, because that is exactly the perspective that most of us have about them as well. And obviously we're missing something that was going on in their culture.
Right.
Nobody really
Well, I think
knows.
we're finding it with the psychedelic renaissance.
Oh, no doubt.
I
Yeah.
think it's coming back,
Right.
and it's been here. There's been a line of that experience existing here on Earth for the whole time. What's funny, I like to think about how someone is always tripping. If you were to
Yeah.
think about the whole world,
Yep.
someone is always connected to that dimension.
Right.
There's never not anyone tripping. That's kind of funny.
Right. I think about that like often with ayahuasca ceremonies because there's always ayahuasca ceremonies going on. I mean, that's a mission right there, and that's not just like eating a couple mushrooms at your house. Ayahuasca ceremony, serious, and there's always one going on. I think about that often as well.
Yep, always. And that's beautiful. That's like the whole, the underworld, so to speak,
Right.
and that's not a scary thing. I'm not saying that as like, because, a lot of people might think of underworld as this, like where Hades is, or, hell or whatever.
Sure.
But it's not that. It's that there is this mystical dimension, either underlying or overlying. I don't know which one, but it's existing. People are tuned into it. People communicate through. Here's my question for you actually about that. What do you think about people having the same thing happen to them on psychedelics? Like, it's almost like they're seeing the same thing and maybe even communicating together and saying, I thought you were going to say that, or like, I knew you were going to think of that. I was also thinking of that. Why does that happen in group psychedelic ceremonies, do you think?
Man, I wish I could give you a solid answer. I do reflect on that very often as I have experienced it with multiple friends multiple times in an undeniable way. And, the Harmala alkaloids from the ayahuasca vine, which actually are not psychedelic tryptamines alone, they're the enzyme inhibitor, the MAOI that's present in the vine. And when those alkaloids were first discovered, they were actually called telepathy because they seem to, even without DMT, without tryptamines, they seem to induce telepathic experiences between subjects.
100%.
And, it probably has something to do with brainwave coherence. I mean, we are walking electromagnetic field generators from both our brain and our hearts. And, it probably has to do with magnetic field resonance. If I was to take a guess, I mean, I have no evidence of that, but if I was to take a guess, it's probably the resonant interactions of your electromagnetic fields kind of allowing your consciousness to interact with one another, even if for brief periods, transient. But I mean, because it's entirely possible that our consciousness is housed within the electromagnetic field generated by our brain and heart, right? And so, if you can, like when you hug someone, for example, when you give someone a hug, you are putting your hearts as close as physically possible to where the two electromagnetic fields generated by them can interact with the least possible amount of interference. So, in my mind, it's entirely possible that thoughts can be transferred in a similar way.
Right.
But who knows? Hopefully one day we know.
I think that's a good guess, man. I mean, you said you're guessing. To me, taking these little bit of leaps of like, I'm going to guess really good though, is what science is. You know what I mean? It's like they're always just kind of really guessing really good. Like Einstein was just kind of really guessing really good. And I was right, and it's funny. But yeah, I mean, also it is insane how these things happen. And I think that also is what people know as the aura, is this electromagnetic field. And I've definitely seen things like almost like, how on a really dry road you can see like gasoline bubbling up in the distance, like a mirage, like that type of energy coming off of like plants and stuff. It looked like this kind of like aura, like kind of like gasoline-y, slightly almost see-through, but still there, like resonance around trees and stuff on psychedelics. And to me, I feel like that is it's aura. People have seen this through all the ages and say, aura, because they don't know really how to describe it. Now we can see electromagnetic fields and test all this stuff, but it's like back then they were just like, oh, that's your aura, chakras, chakras are these energy centers that heart chakra, when you hug each other, you feel good. It's like,
Right.
that type of stuff. We've always been tapped into the same thing, like the truth. We're all pointing towards like one kind of truth thing that's happening, but there's just so many windows, so many perspectives, so many opinions that are coloring the truth. And that's why we have a bajillion mystical traditions. You know
Exactly.
what I mean?
Exactly. Yep. And that's why I think, 5-MeO DMT is probably the most capable psychedelic of uniting the world, based on what you just said, because it shows you like the ultimate self-evident truth. It bypasses all the BS and all the different levels of interpretation, interpretive experiences, where there's still you, the subject, and the object, which is your vision or whatever your thought process. And within 2 or 3 heartbeats, breaks all of that down, and you become
Wow.
absolutely nothingness. Like when people say like ayahuasca and DMT and those compounds give you ego death. Like I thought so too, until actually experiencing real ego death, meaning that like your sense of I is totally gone. You are nothingness, and by virtue of being nothingness, you're actually everything. And when you experience that as a sensory perception, you kind of have like an epiphany of the grandest order. And the thing about it is that it's
Wow.
it's very reliable and consistent. It does basically the same thing every time. There's no visionary
Wow.
content. Just by virtue of experiencing visionary content, your ego is still attached. The ego, of course, meaning your awareness
Right.
of your subjective experience of the world. Just by virtue of having visions, it's still there and functioning, right? Because there's you over here, and then there's the vision, and then it's up for interpretation, and who's going to interpret it except you, and all that. So, but the 5-MeO, which is obviously also made synthetically, but it's most commonly used in the venom of the Bufo alvarius toad, aka Colorado
Yes.
river toad, aka Sonoran desert toad. And man, it's I did it for the first big full release dose, they call it, time last year. And
How many tokes was it?
oh man, one. This is a
Just
one
one.
hitter quitter. Yeah.
One done.
Yeah, and
Wow.
yeah, man. I do want to say this though. It's just about impossible to talk about 5-MeO DMT accurately, but I mean it is important to try, right? But I do want to let people know, don't take this as me telling you to go seek it out and do it. This substance induces what is most likely the most profound experience one could ever have. And for it to be beneficial to you, you have to be ready and willing to spend some time integrating it afterwards. This one's usually only recommended for people with extensive psychedelic experience and have a good facilitator. This is not something that you do by yourself. If you can picture a grain of sugar at the bottom of a big glass of cold water, the sugar grain remains separate from the water, right? But once you dissolve that grain of sugar, it's both everywhere and nowhere at the same time. That's kind of what this substance does as a full-blown, very, very unbelievably intense physical perception. It merges you into complete and total oneness very, very quickly. But again, talking about it does zero justice. If any of you ever do come across it, please approach it with the utmost respect. Research until your eyes bleed and know your facilitator before partaking.
Yes.
I've read a good bit of ancient scriptures and whatnot, philosophy, and the state of consciousness that I can best relate that 5-MeO induces is the Kabbalistic term Ein Sof, that kind of represents the fabric of consciousness in its egoless state, before the emanation and unfolding of physical reality and creation. And it's that undifferentiated, unseparated, pure awareness. And it's really just a remembrance that you have always been and will always be this pure awareness, right? But what makes it so intensely profound is that this experience is packaged up and presented to you as a totally self-evident truth that's not up for interpretation. It's presented as a pure knowingness,
Mm.
unlike most of the experiences that we have in life. And dare I say, even unlike most of the tryptamines, which again still leave you with an interpretive stance on what you experienced. This is just a little different, man, and it's extraordinarily convincing. This has been my experience. I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for a lot of people who have done it.
Yeah, it's always a struggle for me with the NN because two solid hits in, things are already changing,
Right.
and you start to feel like this is already pretty cool. So maybe I want to sit here, but then
Yeah.
you should go for the
Every
third. So
time.
you try to go for the third, and if you are able to, then you do get that total spiral into geometry
Right.
with NN. So this one, that is so interesting. I almost don't know what happens. Like it sounds so kind of mysterious. I understand what you're saying about kind of landing in the everything
Mm.
nothing. I've had glimpses of it. I've never really stayed in it for any certain amount of time. It's almost what you would call samadhi,
Yeah,
no?
that's what I was about to say. So I mean, this state of consciousness is written about in the Vedic and yogic scriptures, and it's discussed as that pure blissful state of non-being, and more often
Mhm.
non-duality. And
Mhm.
it really is something unbelievably like important and intense, and just it feels like the ultimate grand epiphany. And it just takes you kind of into a different state as far as healing goes, compared to all of the other tryptamines in my experience and a lot of other people's experience.
Yeah.
As I said, the total non-attachment of being an individual, and you sink back into
Mhm.
that pure knowingness. And the funny thing about it is that kind of like when you're in a group doing this, and kind of everybody hits that same, usually only one at a time, but everybody kind of hits that same vibration. Like
Mhm.
you can look at a friend of yours and look them dead in the eye and know that that whole cliche about like I'm you and you're me is actually physically reality. And
Yep.
it's so strange, and for it's really
Wow.
difficult to believe, man, just
That's
like the
profound.
others, but this one's kinda almost more difficult to believe, and also more difficult to talk about and to put into words, because, I mean, you can get somewhat close with the other tryptamines. I saw,
Mhm.
fractal geometry, it was like 4D somehow, it was consuming me, all that. But, when
Mhm.
I tell somebody, yeah, it doesn't really have visuals, if so, just very, very small amount. It
Mhm.
yet it makes, DMT look like a cup of coffee. It's really hard.
Wow.
It's really hard to, like, form a mental, perspective about that.
So, is it difficult? I mean, obviously, it's probably the most difficult thing ever, but at the same time, did you hold it together? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so
How did it
it's
go?
man, okay, so here's the deal. On lower doses, about it's like half and half. On lower doses, half the people just sink into this totally blissful, relaxed state, and the other half, it makes them really uncomfortable. Why? Because this compound takes practice, is the ultimate practice of like
Mhm.
letting go and surrendering to it. And so the people who feel
Mhm.
uncomfortable, because on lower doses, you still have the choice to try to fight it, to resist,
Sure.
right? And so those who feel uncomfortable and begin trying to resist it, start to tense up, or just kind of oh, I want it to end, or whatever.
Mhm.
And the other ones who can just deep breath and relax. And you always want to be
Mhm.
laying on the ground in a symmetrical position for this.
Yeah.
And because I mean, you feel like an elephant sitting on your chest, first of all, in the best way possible. As long as you can submit to it, you feel like you're melding into and melting into the ether, right? And so there's like an intense
Wow.
pressure behind that. But if you let that get to you or startle you or whatever, I mean, it's shocking, dude. It's this is
Mhm.
this is serious. And but generally on the
Yeah.
on the higher doses, people, like I said, three, 4 heartbeats tops, you're done. Like there's no you. So you
Wow.
don't you can
Incredible.
try to fight that first half a second all you want, but in 2, 3 more seconds, you're there's no fighting. And that's kind
Mhm.
of, in a sense, it kind of makes it easy. But
Yeah, because it's a short period. It's a heavy transition, but at least it doesn't go on for an hour. It's like 5 seconds later, you're pretty much you've accepted it.
yeah,
You have no
yeah, and then it
choice.
lasts about 20, 30 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer. And the crazy part is when you start to reintegrate back into your sense of individuality. That's kind of like, I just melted into, whatever you want to call it, God, source, consciousness. It's all the same concept, right? It's kind of like the giant battery that powers this whole magical operation, right? And so when you
Yeah.
sink back into your little meat sleeve, you look over at your buddy and you realize that he's just a meat sleeve, and that no matter what,
Mhm.
the conscious awareness that sits in the back of his mind, observing his physicality, observing his mind, his psychological processes, all of that is part of that like kind of energy complex that I call my friend right
Yeah.
here. But in the very back, that conscious awareness, that's me and that's you,
Yes.
and that it really is like
Yes.
that. And I'm like, I mean, that's it,
Yes.
that's the undoubtable sense that you get when you have this experience. And again, that experience of non-duality and the pure indescribable connection to literally all that is described in a lot of Eastern mystic traditions and texts. And man, it's just such a
Mhm.
blessing that there's little Easter eggs like that make their way to Western culture. Because man, I don't know if we could find that without them.
Mhm. Oh, that was amazing. I know what you're talking about because I've had a similar experience, I think, on a very high dose of
Yep.
mushrooms. Um, it's probably different. It's definitely different, but I actually wrote lyrics from this experience, and it kind of encapsulates what you just said. But the lyrics were, "How are you and me in separate bodies? All I feel is unity."
Nice.
So that's what I had wrote from this experience because I truly, in a sense, looked at my friend and could see that too, see what you're saying.
Right.
And I think that's what the namaste means as well.
Exactly.
When they say the light in you or your soul or whatever it is, it's that thing. It's that thing that interconnects us all because we're kind of, it seems like we're getting the same signal
Exactly.
from, the God consciousness, the pulse, like the initial, it is the
Dead
Tao,
on.
whatever it
Dead
is,
on.
you know?
That's it,
So
man. You're
that's crazy.
correct, bro. I mean, my my if you want to call them that, beliefs align exactly with that. That consciousness in
Mhm.
and of itself is, embedded into the very fabric of reality. It's not something that just emerged within it, and that it is,
Yeah.
could be looked at like a radio broadcast through which we are all individual expressions denoted by
Mhm.
our multitude of factors, our genetic code, our psychology, mainly our genetic code, but also our psychology, our past experiences, our environment, and all of these things. We are distortions of that one unaltered signal. And that one
Mhm.
unaltered signal is kind of what you dissolve back into with some of these experiences. And you peel back
Right.
your embedded layers of distortion. I mean, the word distortion means that you take a signal and you change it, you add harmonics to it,
Yeah.
you change it in some way. And we are changing that signal in our own individual way, and our distortions are what create our individuality, right? And so like
Yeah.
that broadcast, though, that pure conscious awareness broadcast, in my viewpoint, is God, is what
Mhm.
we call God
Right.
in its purest
100%.
manifestation, before it's personified, before metaphor and hyperbole is added to its expressions. It is just pure awareness.
Mhm. Exactly. And I think that's what all these mystics tap into when, they say things like, we're all one or we're all the son of God or all these things
Right.
because we're interconnected by that. And it's just super humbling and super beautiful to have that experience. And um, it's definitely heavy. And that's why I say it's not for everyone
Yeah.
because some people just aren't looking for a heavy
Hmm.
experience. They don't want their life to be shattered. And I don't say shattered in a bad way. I know it sounds like that, but it's like you're gonna see a whole new dimension of life that you previously thought was
Right.
impossible. essentially. You're just like, you would have never conceived that you could witness the things that psychedelics allow you to see. And part of the weird thing is they're stigmatized because, I guess, pretty much of the law and the government's not wanting people to have access to this,
Right.
the hierarchies and stuff, because it is so powerful and is so empowering to, to the people that witness these things end up being, mystics or religious leaders or people who write texts and or music that go down in history and all the stuff. So it's definitely like a powerful thing that they don't want us to know about, but it is like the most valuable thing you could know. It really seems to be the philosopher's stone, so to
Right.
speak, in the sense of almost the ultimate learning.
Right.
Pure
Yeah, and I
wisdom.
mean that's exactly why, it's not in government's best interest for everybody to be on that wavelength. I mean, we're running a business here. There's no doubt about that.
Hmm.
So, I mean,
Right.
it no doubt deprograms some of our cultural programmings that have been long standing for decades, if not centuries, and that's not good for business. And it also, uh,
Hmm.
you know, kind of in a few hours can just make you realize just how insanely absurd some of our societal structures are. So
Right. And I think that the way that they're looked at, yes, there's a lot of people that take them, millions. You know what I mean? Millions of people take psychedelics on a monthly basis, that type of thing. But then the general public thinks that something bad is going to happen. You know what I
right,
mean? It's weird. It's like it's not going to be in their best interest. Like they think they're going to see something and it's going to mess them up, and like they're not going to be able to do their job or raise their family or whatever it is. But what's super weird is that it makes you do all those things better.
right,
You raise your family better, you do your job better, you become a better person if you go through this experience that is humbling. It is sometimes a little tough, but hey, you can do it. Like we're freaking like we have a lot of endurance inside our soul
right.
if you look for it. Just don't be afraid to do things that are scary. In fact, there's a lot of philosophy out there that says go towards things that scare
No
you,
doubt.
and not in an evil sense, of course, always with good intentions, you know what I
Right,
mean? But it's like things that kind of you're kind of afraid to do, those things you maybe put off and you should be doing and you said you would do, blah blah blah. They're kind of scary because they're unknown and you don't know whether you'll succeed or not succeed and all the stuff. But honestly, it's like if you go towards those things that give you anxiety, you can turn that anxiety into excitement, into adrenaline, and go into things that previously maybe scared you, like psychedelics or a breathwork ceremony, or start creating music, or do your podcast or whatever it could be.
right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, it's stigmatized. I mean, that stigmatization is part of the programming that, they ultimately deconstruct. And if the word drugs wasn't tossed around so carelessly and the war on drugs
mhm,
didn't do that so intentionally, I mean, a better name for psychedelic compounds is molecular biotechnology. I mean, they're not drugs. Drugs is, heroin
right,
and crack and stuff that we know to
mhm,
ruin people's lives, tear families apart, cause people to become someone worse than their previous self. Whereas, I mean,
right,
everybody pretty much knows most of the time when used in the proper manner, psychedelics really you either leave the same or you leave better. I mean, I don't know too many people
yep,
who leave worse than they were before.
yeah,
Even through the really difficult experiences, those are usually the most profound. And those people are having a
mhm,
difficult experience because they are confronting things about their own very nature that they wouldn't otherwise confront. And it's
yep,
forcefully put onto them like, look, no, you're going to work this out right now, whether or not you like it. No, it's not ending now. Look, you'll be fine in 5 hours. Work
mhm,
this out. And you think about it and you think about it and you think about it. And then you reach an end point and you're
mhm,
better off than you were before, even if
yep,
during it seemed maybe otherwise. I mean, I've
yep,
never been around someone who is having a really challenging experience. There are no bad trips. That's another word that needs to go somewhere else. There are challenging
right,
trips, and I've never been around someone who experienced a very challenging one, and I've seen some really rough ones. I've had some really rough ones who didn't come out on the other side, much better off. I mean, it's no doubt like akin
Yes.
to the hero's journey in old literature,
Yeah. 100%. It's grace too, man. Freaking something in there saves you too.
Yep.
Something in those experiences has love. I don't know why, but mushrooms somehow or another, they will show you stuff, but they show it with love. They're like, bro, we're just showing you so you know and become better. Like, we love you, you know? So that's really cool.
Yeah.
I will say it depends on the strain, because I actually have gotten one that I felt like he was a grumpy mushroom. He was a little grumpster, man. Like, he was just not having a good day. But almost every single and still I dealt with his grumpy grandpa nature. You know what I mean? Like, you can still get through the experience, but it's like, well, that other strand had a little more of like a lighthearted vibe. Let me try that one.
Right.
Because similar with like cannabis,
Mhm.
there's different effects for different mushroom strains.
Yeah. The thing, I mean, mushrooms. A lot of people think the only active in them is psilocybin, but it's not. There's a good handful of compounds in mushrooms, and recently we discovered they might even contain their own MAOI, but they also have baeocystines in them. So those compounds kind of color the experience, the same way that terpenes color the experience of cannabis. So the different genetic strains most certainly do play a role. And then it's always hard, just because of the nature of the psychedelic experience. It's always hard to know whether you can attribute that to the mushroom or whether you can attribute that to your own setting. It's difficult to discern that.
I know. Yeah. Well, what do you think about set and setting? Do you like nature? A lot of my best experiences have been where I'm just sitting in the middle of like a park or like, some kind of nature environment. Where do you find your experiences to be the
100%,
best?
100%. Yeah, it's grand in nature, man, and I think that really kind of helps to cool people off too, as far as fear or whatever. As long as it's a chill spot, like I
Yeah,
smoked.
yeah. Without a lot of people
Right.
passing through and stuff.
I smoked DMT on the top of the H1n1 pyramid in Belize, the Mayan pyramid, and it was kind of not tight. There was too many people up there, and like 30 seconds
Sure.
into it, it was awesome for about 30 seconds, and then 30 seconds into it, my fiance told me like our group left us, and we had to follow them. It was a 3-hour ride back to the ship, and so I had to get up and
Oh
walk down all these
gosh.
sketchy stairs and all that. So it was worth it, but
Wow.
namely, I mean, that was kind of like a one-time thing for me. I just really wanted to do that out there, and that kind of.
Oh man, but I'm sure that stair descend was fucking like
Dude, it was
ancient,
sketchy.
dude.
There are no handrails, and the stairs are like maybe 2 feet wide. And it's like for real, like fall you die type shit. So like,
I'm
yeah,
glad you didn't fall,
yeah, it
dude.
was pretty wobbly for a second, but no, it was all good. It was really cool though, man. But like, yeah, outside is definitely like my jam too. Especially for like ayahuasca uh
Yeah.
situations. But yeah, I mean, there's just something
Yeah.
else when you can watch the like the trees grow, and just like kind of, it always feels like you're just in direct connection and communication with all of life around you. See the tiniest little bug and
Right.
have a whole new appreciation for him on the walking across a
Yes.
leaf and all that, man.
I know. It's like, whoa, he's got a whole
Yeah,
world down
I
there,
think as a whole, man, if everybody
You know?
really just took the time and made like, no matter what it takes type effort to just like find a, doesn't even have to be a schedule, just a frequency of just like really intentionally going and like grounding yourself and reconnecting with nature outside. I mean, I think the world could really be a whole nother place, because I grew up in the Louisiana Honey Island swamp, so like I'm a river rat, right? I mean, I grew up on the river, catfishing, fishing, all that stuff. And
Right.
I honestly, like, I have so much respect for people that can live in a city, because I feel like I couldn't actually do it. Like, I don't know, like I lived in Metairie, Louisiana for about a year and a half, and there was like nothing around me but concrete, and I like was gonna go nuts if I didn't
Wow.
move back. And so like I find it a necessity to kind of like find
Yeah.
that time to reconnect and go outside and do whatever. You know, my outside time is generally the river out here in the Honey Island Swamp.
Wow,
But yeah.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You know, I've actually had one what I felt was like psychedelic brush with death when we went to Enchanted Rock here in Texas. We took, I want to say 2 grams of mushrooms, and our goal, because we had been training as like kind of a like cross country runner type, runners, like, to run up this rock, this massive hill. And so we took the mushrooms, waited for them to kick in, had a nice laugh, drank some water, and then we were gonna like run up this hill. And I think it was probably 45 seconds into the run. The incline was so steep, and I literally felt like I thought my muscles were gonna explode out of my body because they burned so bad. Like literally, it was like the hardest thing ever. It's funny because then my friend keeps running and he looks back, and at the same time the rock is like melting around me, almost like it's lava.
Right.
And it felt like just such like a freaking Lord of the Rings moment. And my friend's looking back at me and I'm like melting and I'm like, help,
Right.
like, and then I was like, I think I almost died just now. Like, I'm just gonna walk back that way. So it was as simple as that. You
Right.
know what I mean? I didn't though, but it was honestly a good experience to have, to just be like really just kind of like sit in the grass.
Right.
You know what I mean? You don't have to climb a
Yeah.
mountain. But do what you want to do, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, that's great, man.
That's
But
crazy.
yeah, I mean, hopefully we can get back to all that congregating stuff. Waiting for the world to come back to normal, man. Honestly, it's been crazy. I can't believe we've been doing this for this long. And it's always kind of difficult. I don't know if you saw an article I wrote. It was fairly interesting, man. I went down this rabbit hole, actually elicited in part by an experience I had 5 years ago and a vision that I had. But I went down this rabbit hole about the sun and its relationship to what's happening on the earth and stuff. And it's you understand that we're in a solar minimum right now.
No, tell me about that.
So this is like a really long story, but I'll kind of break it down. So the sun goes through an 11-year cycle where we have basically ups and downs in the number of sunspots on the surface of the sun, and all sunspots are really is basically the visual representation of the strength of the magnetic field of the sun, right? And so it ebbs and flows in cycles of 11 years. Well, when it's low, when there are virtually no sunspots, that means that the sun has a very weak magnetic field right now. And when the magnetic field of the sun is low, so usually when the sun's magnetic field is strong, it actually like shields the earth from what are called cosmic rays. And cosmic rays are like really highly charged particles that originate from outside the solar system. And multiple studies have shown that when these cosmic rays are bombarding us like they are during solar minimum, that it causes genetic mutation to occur really, really quickly in bacteria and viruses and even in animals and humans. And so like historically speaking, cosmic rays have given rise to pandemics multiple times. Now I'm not trying to portray this as fact, but historically speaking, these solar minima, like grand solar minima they call, have given rise to pandemics. And a couple of those pandemics that it's given rise to, let me pull my little I'm gonna pull that article I wrote real quick.
Where's the article published?
So I published it on Medium. This was the result of about, I don't know, 3 days of like hardcore research and like kind of connecting different dots. So what happens is that minima in the sunspot cycle present, this is an excerpt from a study, that's why I wanted to pull this up. Minima in the sunspot cycle present conditions conducive to the entry or activation of new pathogens and also for mutations of already circulating bacteria and viruses. 3 grand minima of solar activity on record: the Sporer minimum from 1450 to 1550, the Maunder minimum from 1650 to 1700, and the Dalton minimum from 1800 to 1830, have all been marked by a preponderance of pandemics: smallpox, English sweats, plague, and cholera. And this is a really long article, so I won't get like into like the super nitty gritty of it, but it happens in like an 11-year cycle. And the
So it's like
H1N
Ebola, the last one or whatever.
well, no, the H1N1
Oh yeah,
pandemic, where it was like everywhere, is 11 years ago in 2009.
got it.
And so basically this has been being observed as far back as 1971. There was like some stuff in Nature magazine published about how the sunspot cycles correlate with influenza type pandemics. And it's really
Interesting.
crazy. Yeah, it sent me down this.
So wait, is it mutating and creating a new virus, or is our immune system being
So
mutated? Like, what's happening?
well, it could potentially happen both ways, but what seems to happen is that the virus mutates to be able to infect humans. So for instance, it would be a pre-existing coronavirus that, may or may not have existed in bats first, and then developed that S protein, which allows such a high binding affinity for the human ACE2 receptor. Something like that, which obviously, if you look around, there's a lot of scientists trying to claim that there's no way this thing underwent natural evolution and to gain the ability to infect humans, yada yada. So but yeah, it's crazy. But anyway, the reason I brought that up was because one of my major fascinations is with genetics, right, and DNA. And kind of I've grown to view stars as potentially conscious and entities that go through their own cycles and ebb and flow as well. And what is fact is that when people say that we're stardust, that's entirely true, because the atoms that create our bodies were fused inside the core of the sun, right? And so what happens is it all starts out as hydrogen and helium, and then which are 1 and 2 protons respectively. And what happens is in the core of stars, these very simple atoms are fused into the more complex elements that create life, and all the other elements as well, and then sneezed into space via these solar flares, right? And so like like the sun, from a physics perspective, literally is our creator. Like it created the physical atoms that were then sneezed into space, which over millions or billions of years we're now being formed from, right?
Is it our sun or is it a sun?
Our sun is we don't really know this for 100% fact, but it seems like a combination. But it seems like our sun contributed to like most of it in our solar
So we have a
system.
really powerful sun.
But there's no, all stars do this. That seems to be what they are. They're like element complexers. They take single protons and turn them into complex elements, right? And like some stars produce elements that our sun does not produce, and vice versa. So it's weird. It's like other solar systems are loaded with elements that we won't find here, which is why like they're talking about things like asteroids potentially being mineable for brand new elements.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's crazy. They've been doing a lot of asteroid mining talk. I don't know if you've been seeing all that, but they're talking about how
what are they gonna go try catch them with nets and shit out in space or what?
Man, I don't know what they plan on doing.
How are you gonna catch that shit?
The consensus is that asteroid mining is gonna bring the world its first trillionaire. I know Bezos is looking at it.
Oh my god, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Apparently they were all like testifying in Congress today. I didn't get to watch some of it, but my roommate was telling me.
Who was?
Bezos.
Oh, really?
As well as Zuckerberg and some of these other tech titans.
For what?
Just the government wanting more control and
Really?
insight into what they're doing, it sounded like. Yeah.
Right. I love watching Mark Zuckerberg testify to Congress.
He is so funny, dude. And what's funny I noticed about him is he knows how to milk the time, because they're always like, my time is out. Like by the time he's done answering like this really simple question with like a really long-winded response. So he's just like wasting everyone's time up there.
I like watching him sip his water.
Oh my god.
The best.
Yes, I saw that.
Brings me joy.
That is hilarious. Well, man, I wonder what those guys think about psychedelics and this whole renaissance.
I wonder that semi often as well, man. Me and you wonder a lot of the same stuff, dude. Because man, I just always am asking myself, man, is Mark Zuckerberg, down with all this? And what about
he's gotta be, man. He's a smart person. He would know that psychedelics aren't the same thing as cocaine and heroin and you know what I mean? All the stuff.
Yeah.
It's like I
always wonder about
he would know.
Elon too, man.
Yes. Oh, I know. And it's funny because that Kanye West guy, he's trying to hang out with Elon the other day or something, and he's like talking about DMT on his one of his last records.
Really? Oh, someone
Um,
told me that. I never even listened to
yeah, he was talking about I done died and lived again on DMT, huh?
it.
And that was his. That was his. It was in the hook too. It was literally in the hook.
Right.
So that's
I
interesting.
always have an internal battle with myself whether stuff like that is good or bad. It's
I
probably
know.
both, and
It's
it's
weird.
honestly none of my business. But like, I just I wonder where it's gonna point, where it's gonna end up. I mean, at some point, this has to be broadcast. I mean, it's literally
Mm-hmm.
the biggest headline modern culture has ever seen,
Yeah.
and at some point, it's got to be just pumped out there like that. But man,
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult to discern like when and
Yeah.
how and who and all that. And I mean, who am I to say? Who are you to say?
Mm-hmm.
Who are any of us to say? This is a birthright. So like,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna no doubt be very interesting watching the next couple of decades unfold. Man, even in just the next 10 years, next single decade,
Mm-hmm.
thanks to the work that Johns Hopkins and Dr. Roland Griffiths over there are doing, and
Yes.
maps, and I mean, these people are changing the future
Mm-hmm.
forever. And what's strange, man, is that most people, it seems to me, are unaware of how quickly the AI revolution is about to get here. And what's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen here in the next, man, within 10 years, our world will be damn near unrecognizable from a technological standpoint. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to buckle up, man. And what's
Yeah.
strange is that during that exact time, the psychedelic renaissance should be in full motion. So, like,
Yes.
we're going to be, they'll be, at least to a high degree, destigmatized at like the same or similar time window as machine learning becomes a household word and is, very prevalent in all of the technology that we interact with on a daily basis. So it's like,
Yes.
man, the combination of those two factors is going to make a really crazy 2030s, I think,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
I don't even
I
know
th-
how to start imagining that world in 2030.
have you happened to see Westworld?
I haven't.
It's really good. It's a good show. In season 3, they pretty much show like that time era, and I think they did a really good job of showing where the technology will be based on where we are right now. Um, and it pretty much goes into, everything is voice. You have this little clip on your ear. That's your phone. Literally, you touch it and it does whatever you want. You can literally say, I need a car. I need a car like right now. And
Whoa.
this like robot car will pull up out of nowhere. They're just like waiting to be requested, and it'll drive you self-driving wherever you want to go. It's all connected. Social media, it's all there. You're seeing shit through your glasses, but also, everything is like voice. Even walking into your house, your house will recognize your voice and won't respond to other people's voices. But you just say the lights on, the lights are on, and
Right.
but also what's really weird is they track what you do algorithmically so that they can actually with accuracy tell the future because of what you do. Like they could tell you where you're going to be, you
Whoa.
know, 6 months from now based on collecting the data of what you've been doing and where you were at what times and taking everything into account. It's like,
Wow.
oh, this is the time of year where you visit Colorado, and this is the time of the day where you'll be eating breakfast. So we can actually show you in 6 years, there's an 87% probability you're gonna be eating breakfast in Colorado with your brother or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
It gets really heady because this shit, yeah, it tracks you, and you're able to see the future. They're even able to tell you what risks you might be facing as far as health in the future. It's going to tell you like, hey, be careful of your hips, or your heart is going to be having trouble at this point, and it's all medical
Right.
too. So it's like everything is just embedded. It's pretty much like a smartphone controlled by your voice
Right.
that can do anything and everything
I
for
think
you.
stuff like you just got into about the, your heart's gonna have problems here, this and that health
Hmm.
wise. I think once machine learning is integrated with studying the genome and identifying problem genes and whatnot throughout the whole entirety of the human genome. I think stuff like that is definitely coming and definitely coming soon, man. As
Yeah.
far as being able to
Yeah.
predict, like accurately predict illness based on your genetic code. I think
Mhm.
that's man,
100%.
I'd bet
And wouldn't that be nice to just know what's wrong with you too, like right then and there?
100%.
Just kind of just request, you know, hey, is my foot broken? It's like your foot is
Yeah,
not
yeah,
broken. You know, it's like okay, good. You know,
yeah,
that's funny.
yep.
I think that's where we're heading, man. I mean, technology's coming, whether we like it or not. You know, the AI is going to take
Mhm.
over. They say don't punch robots because they're going to remember it and they're going to come after you. So everyone be nice to
Yeah,
robots.
I was talking to somebody the other day, man. What else is gonna be strange is like if you like once these robots or whatever the AIs have, really well defined emotions or emotional
Hmm.
emulation to where it's like indiscernible from like a human emotion.
Yeah.
If you're blindly speaking to something and it's emotional, you wouldn't know the difference between a robot and a person, type level of emotional emulation. It's
Yeah.
gonna that in and of itself is gonna make the world a pretty strange place, man. Because then it's
Yes.
like,
That there's a
whoa,
Black Mirror
yeah.
episode on that, dude, where they're able to like have someone call you that has passed because it's an
Oh my
AI able
god.
to replicate, yeah, like that dude based on his social media and all his stuff and literally like get it down. So you're talking to an AI. And it's really weird because on this episode of Black Mirror, like this girl's always off talking to this AI. She's literally talking to nobody.
Right.
Nobody.
Right.
But it literally sounds exactly like her boyfriend that passed.
Uh,
Exactly what he would say. It's
yeah,
crazy. That's gonna be
it
something too.
really is, man. I mean,
It's gonna
the
be
only real fact floating around out there, man, is that we are living in the most interesting time I could possibly imagine. We're gonna be the last generation that knows both AI and all of that stuff once that new world is integrated, but also remembers what it's like to play outside in the 90s and be home when the street lights come on. You know what I'm saying? Like our kids is born right now, born in the last 10 years even, don't really know
Mhm.
what it is to not have a smart device or an iPad or whatever, and they
Right.
don't know what it's like to play a PlayStation 1 with squares and
Mhm.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, play outside, be home when the street lights come on, all that stuff. It's weird because we're gonna be
Yep.
like the translators of the old world to our children
Right.
and grandchildren. They're not gonna know what you're talking about.
I know. I was just talking to my friend about this the other day because I used to like play Zelda for real though. Like I would actually be going through, fields and picking up freaking little acorns
Yeah.
and shooting them with my little freaking
Oh, you mean in
slingshot,
real life?
pretending I was in real life though.
Nice.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, and it was influenced by the
Right.
game, of
Right.
course, because I played the game as a kid, but then I'd go outside and be like, I'm playing Zelda for real,
Right.
Um, and I don't know if kids are gonna get to do that. They're gonna be so sucked into, devices constantly. But who knows, man? It's weird because it's like, if we are being guided well by, some supreme captain, salute,
Mm.
it's all gonna be okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I guess we just see what happens.
Yeah, man. No doubt. It's gonna
Yeah.
be wild.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. But dude, amazing chat today. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, real quick, tell people where to search, for your music. Tell us the release date, the album name, your name, all the platforms, shout out Gravitas and that
Yeah,
type of stuff.
yeah, definitely shout out Gravitas. They are an amazing team. I'm humbled and honored to have them release my music. And, the album is called Solstice. It's going to be released on all platforms on September 18th. It will be premiering on September 4th with a single, and you can catch the premiere of the full album with Taz visuals featured on YouTube on the Shiv Light YouTube channel, ShiveLight. That'll be on September 17th. And yeah, but the
Yeah.
18th, everything's coming out, all platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud, all that jazz.
Let's go.